So a member of my squadron crawled into the intake to pull me out. It was so hot in the intake, he couldn't stay in there. So he crawled back out, and they had to wait for a good 20, 30 minutes before I could be taken out. He crawled back in with the scissors and cut my jacket, which you saw one picture of me wearing this flight jacket. It had been pulled over my head. Now the reason it was pulled over my head, because on that day, we were in the North Atlantic for a number of weeks, and it was very cold in the morning. But I went up on deck, and I realized it wasn't cold enough to wear my sweater underneath that jacket. So I didn't put on the sweater, and the jacket was loose. And so when I stepped in front of the intake, the jacket was pulled over my head, and if it hadn't been for that, I probably would have lost my head or my eyes. There was over 4,000 pounds of suction. And I went in, and within less than a second, I hit the turbine axle. A turbine, you've seen them in commercial airlines, they're quite visible. In a jet plane, they're too far back to see. But they're spinning at high speed, and they squirt jet fuel in there and it explodes, and it makes it very hot. And as soon as the pilot saw his instruments and the sound of the plane alter, he cut the engine, and it stopped flight operations. You have to understand that if this were the flight deck of the carrier, the forward part is when they catapult the planes off. The aft part is where the planes are lined up in a certain formation, and it's very, very choreographed, because there's no room for error. And the sound which you heard, there's nothing like the sound. When I first went up on the flight deck, I couldn't believe how much sound there was, with planes being catapulted and different levels of revving up, different types of planes. It was a real experience. Now, I was trained, and there was no mistakes that were made as far as I was concerned. But let me say that when they pulled me out of the plane, they took me over to the side, and they called the chaplain. I had no life signs. The only chaplain that was available, I think we had 3, Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish. The only chaplain available was the Catholic chaplain. And he kneeled down next to my body, took out a lavender ribbon and put it around he put it around his neck, and he began to give me last rites. Now, I watched all this. By the way, my tears, it's not sadness. It's the enormity of the paradigm that he was in, the paradigm that I was in, and it's the paradigm that I'm talking to you about that you're in. So to me, it's huge. The only thing I can do, which I didn't do as a child, is emote. And sometimes it's embarrassing because I don't want you to think that I'm breaking up and I'm sad. I'm really just amazed at the event in its totality, whatever totality means. So he's kneeling and he's giving me last rites, and I felt his angst. He was conflicted. He did not want to give me last rites. My dog Ted said Jewish, he's Catholic, although I had attended his services a number of times, more so than the Jewish thing on Friday nights. So, to me, he was the right guy. Anyway, I went into my body. I opened my eyes. And I said to him, "Father, don't you know I'm Jewish?" I had no life signs. He was stunned. He couldn't speak. He was basically stunned. And I said to him, after I recognized that he wasn't going to, answer me, I said, "It's okay, Father, you'll do." So he gave me last rites. They took me down to sick bay, which on this ship had 6 doctors, many corpsmen. We were the main hospital facility for the fleet. So it was a modern operating room. The name in the Navy was sick bay. I was more than sick, but on the strength of what Father Fitzpatrick told the surgeon, that I had actually talked to him, because when I got down there, I had no life signs. They proceeded to try to revive me, and eventually I came into the life signs that they were interested in, pulse, the whole thing. And they didn't think I would make it, and so they called Father Fitzpatrick again. He came back and gave me last rites a second time. And it was quite amazing, because the unfoldment of what I was witnessing up in the corner of the room, compartment. In the Navy, ships do not have rooms. And if you're a recruit and you use the word room, you're going to get extra duty. Anyway, in the compartment, I was watching the scene, and I was on a gurney, and there were men all around the gurney. There was no space. They had doctors and corpsmen, and they were all experiencing emotion. Some of them felt it was a lost cause. Others felt they had to have hope. Others were frightened, because that's about the worst thing that can happen, is getting pulled into an intake or walking into a moving prop. Even worse than being blown off the ship. I watched them work on my body, and as I looked at the scene, I was completely identified with what I was watching. And what came to me in that space of awareness, not these words, but the reality within me as I watched that body. And by the way, I had no attachment to the body or the outcome. I wasn't the least upset that I knew it was my body, but I didn't care whether or not they revived me or whatever. What I experienced within myself, wordlessly, was the statement, "I am the love I seek." And as a little kid, I didn't belong anywhere. I wasn't really included for too long. There was nothing dependable until I got to my foster home. I was blessed. I was very, very blessed to have a wonderful foster mother. I cannot get through this talk without crying, okay? So just consider it like breathing for me. For years I tried to stuff it and do whatever I could to avoid it, but it's a done deal. I'm going to feel this emotion. Anyway, I had a wonderful foster mother who grounded me in kindness, nurturing, and acknowledgement. And I use those words, those are kind of adult words, but I went on in life to become a teacher, elementary and junior high teacher, and eventually a clinical social worker. And when I look at some words, they're words. They represent an experience, but sometimes the words can be just recognized and you move on. Acknowledgement is the big one. To be seen. My foster mother was very strict. She had like six of us kids, and they were always, some were leaving, new ones were coming in, but the average was about 6 kids. And it was a wonderful experience for me, even though I never knew when I was going to be taken away, which I eventually was after about 3 years. And I did not want to go. And I also wanted to go and live with my mother, who was the reason I was being taken out of the foster home, was to go and live with my mother. But I did not want to leave that foster home. Where am I? I am the love I seek. Now those words, to me, are circular, just like that intake. I am the love I seek. And when I look at the intake, and by the way, that picture of me in the intake, that was taken in the Mediterranean. We were moored off of Greece or some, I can't remember the country, but I didn't have shore leave for the day So we would hide in there and sleep because it was about 8 foot long. It had a nice gentle curve to it, and it was like a hammock, except it was metal. But it was not uncommon for the fellows that had that plane to get out of visibility so they wouldn't get extra duty. Because anytime you were ambulatory, if they saw you, they, meaning the petty officers or officers, they could, solicit you into extra duty. And we were always tired as hell. I mean, we worked on that 12, 14, 16 hours a day. I could leave, once my plane left the deck, I could walk over to the side of the ship, lie down on the deck, and sleep within 30 seconds. And I wasn't the only one. And the noise was incredible. But it didn't bother me. Once my plane was in the air, I'm free. And I couldn't even wait to get down below deck. I went right over to the side and slept. So just to finish up on the injury, I had a lot of fractures, mainly fractures. My head, both arms, my leg, my back. All in all, I spent 19 months in 4 different military hospitals. But 13 of those months was in a body cast, because this arm, which was just about ripped off when I went in, my right arm didn't go in. The left arm did. So it was a ripped back and lacerated under the armpit. And in that event, I contracted somehow a very serious strain of bone infection. The clinical name is osteomyelitis, but there are different strains of of bacteria. Is that the right word, bacteria? And I had the worst one. And it kept me in that body cast for 13 months. My right arm was like this, with a cast coming down my arm and around my chest and back and resting on my hips. I had a number of surgeries, some amazing experience in the hospital. I can say this about the magnitude and my attitude. I was incapacitated for about 4 months. I had traction coming out of my head with a weight pulling my spine out. Both arms were in casts. I was catheterized. I was like, I couldn't do anything for myself. But I just knew I was going to be all right. I had one 15-second upset with God, wanting to know why this happened to me. And it passed like a burp, but I remember feeling it, and I never hung on to that thought again. I just knew I was going to be all right. And I adjusted quite well to it, went back to college, became a teacher, then I went on to graduate school, became a social worker, then I went on to postgraduate training as a therapist, and I was well on my way into a career. I had gotten married, had 3 kids, and that was a whole journey in itself. The thing that captures my awareness more than anything of the whole thing was talking to Father Fitzpatrick. Talking. I didn't say a lot. I just said, "Don't you know I'm Jewish?" He told this story to my mother. He was flabbergasted. He told her that he had never thought of being a rabbi, but he did in that moment. Had he been a rabbi, I would have said, "Where's the priest?" I had gone to Catholic school, Catholic church, I had communion, I went to catechism. I was pretty much programmed in the Christian tradition, you know. But I'm, you know, I come from a lineage that is Hebrew, you know. So before my injury, life to me was an experience of separation, exchange. Everything was out there. I'm here. Everybody's different. Now, when I was in my foster home, I had an epiphany when I was about 4 years old on a tricycle. And I had a revelation that I was in this life. It was very clear to me. It was on the tricycle, the only one that we had, and I just had the sense that I'm here. And I had the sense that there were others here with me. Who are they? I also felt that there was a purpose for me being here. I didn't know what it was. But the words, "What am I supposed to do here?" were the exact words that were in my mind. They were never audible, out that you couldn't hear them. And it was an awareness that has never left me. I'm 80 years old now. I still feel like the potency of those questions that came to me on that tricycle are relevant and valuable to me today.